The Human Sciences Research Council says South Africans' level or life satisfaction has declined. This was revealed in a social attitudes survey measuring public perceptions, values and social fabric of modern South Africa. Let's unpack some of the other findings. We're joined this morning by Dr. Stephen Gordon, who is a senior research specialist in the Developmental, Capable and Ethical State at the HSRC. Dr. Gordon, it's great to see you. Thanks very much indeed for coming on. And just taking a look at some of the findings, there's one line that really stands out for me where it says 39% of South Africans feel that within the next 5-year period of their lives are not going to get better, it's not going to stay the same, but indeed are going to get worse.
Yes. Thank you very much for inviting me on to talk about this important issue. Optimism is a central feature of any good democracy. To adequately plan for the future, we need to believe in the future. So when we see a decline in optimism in the South African Social Attitudes Survey data, it is a serious concern for all of us. But I would actually draw your attention to a finding within that data that perhaps should be even more shocking. So in studies of optimism, we note that the youth are often the most optimistic in a society. But if we look at how youth attitudes on this important issue have changed, it is quite startling. Consider that 50% of millennials in 2016 thought that life would get better for them in the next 5 years. In 2021, only 28% of millennials thought life would improve in the next 5 years. A significant drop in optimism amongst this important birth cohort. For Generation Z, people born in the 2000s and onwards, the findings are even more stark. Consider that 70% of Generation Z thought that their lives would improve in the next 5 years in 2017. In 2021, only 40% of Generation Z feel that life will get better. So the most optimistic demographic in our society is losing faith in the future, a serious cause for concern. Because we must remember that this is the new voting bloc in South Africa. Young people will make up a majority of voters, potential voters right now. And Generation Z will soon eclipse their millennial counterparts within the electorate. If this generation loses faith in democracy, it is a serious concern for everyone in South Africa.
Yeah, absolutely. You talk about optimism. That's obviously linked very closely to how much hope we have for our country, for ourselves, for the next 5 years and into the future. You know, how does that lack of hope, and I want to talk more about what feeds into this sense of sort of declining optimism, but what does that do for a society to have such declining levels of hope, which is so important just as humanity?
No, absolutely. Now, obviously, as individuals, we need to feel hope in the future in order to adequately plan for the future. When people feel despondent about their future, they do not make plans. They don't start new businesses. They are afraid to have children. They're afraid to seek new opportunities. They're afraid to believe in the kind of change that we need to make things better. Consider, for example, another startling statistic: satisfaction with how democracy is working in South Africa. Now, in 2004, 62% of the adult population thought that democracy was working. This fell to 46% in 2009 and is now at 25% in 2021. A significant decline over the last 20 years. It's these kind of statistics, this growing disillusionment with the status quo, which leads people to withdraw from society and no longer participate in our great civic democracy.
Yeah. So we talked about, the issue of declining optimism. And it's, from what you've described, it's not just about, the population, vast portions of the population are sort of feeling down. It's not just about that, right? this feeds directly into our economy, as you say, into the creation of businesses. People feel hopeful, they feel optimistic, they plan for the future, but also surely must have an impact on political stability or instability.
Absolutely. We also must remember that how do we judge a society? Do we judge a society based on gross domestic products, on national income per capita, or do we judge a society on how satisfied people are with their lives, the quality of life that the average person has? There's been a real movement internationally to turn away from more macroeconomic indicators of progress and focus very clearly on how quality of life as a priority in the measurement of a good society. And in this metric, South Africa is unfortunately coming up short in the last few years, in which we have seen declines in satisfaction with life, declines in optimism. And this is very, very serious, as I've said before. Mm-hmm. Now, your question is about democracy. Now, there is quite a worrying statistic that we found from the South African Social Attitudes Survey. In 2016, 58% of the adult population stated that democracy was preferable to any other kind of government. Not that high, but still a decent proportion of the population. However, this had fallen, and in 2021, only 47% of the adult population gave the same answer. So we see a decline in faith in the ability of democracy as a system to deliver for people. And this is serious for a nation that is going into a national and provincial election in 2024. Indeed, we are growing very concerned about low voter turnout in 2024. We saw very low voter turnout in 2019 in the last national provincial government elections, and we might see that becoming the norm, in which turnout is low in successive elections.
Yeah. Can you give us a sense, Doc, on what kinds of issues fed into these sort of more pessimistic views that were expressed in the survey? And here in front of me, I've got things like, the performance of government institutions, trust in those institutions, and then on a very practical level, the provision of services. All of that feeds into the more or the less hopeful view that came out of the survey, right?
Absolutely. So if we ask people, what are the issues that are most important to you? What are your priority issues? People will talk about unemployment. They'll talk about crime and safety. They'll talk about poverty. They'll talk about service provision. They'll talk about corruption. These are the kind of issues that average South Africans want to see addressed in their lives. Let's take something very, very simple. Electricity provision. Satisfaction with electricity provision used to be very high in South Africa, particularly in the mid-2010s. In 2016, 72% of the adult population was satisfied with the provision of electricity in their neighborhood. In 2021, it was only 38% were satisfied with electricity provision in their neighborhood. And the 2022 figures, which were collected at the end of last year, are currently being collated, but I can tell you the numbers are even lower for 2022, suggesting growing dissatisfaction with the level of services provided to average South Africans. So these are some of the issues that are feeding in. Another important issue to take seriously is growing dissatisfaction with the South African police services. We must remember that trust in the police is at its lowest level currently than it's ever been. Trust in the police has never been high, but we've seen it fall from 41% in 2011 to only 28% in 2021, and an even lower margin will be reported for 2022.
Yeah, and I imagine if we were to do this survey again today, those numbers would be even lower.
The mood currently is very, very dour. people in particular are worried about the general economy not delivering the kind of economic opportunities they would like to see. South Africa's satisfaction with the general economy has never really been, very high, but dissatisfaction, people's discontent, has grown significantly. In 2007, 36% of people were dissatisfied with the general economy. In 2021, it was 65%. So we've really seen growing dissatisfaction with the ability of the economy to provide the kind of opportunities that people are looking for. Yeah. And this has created, I believe, significant despondency about the future and what people can hope for the future. And this is something we need to turn around. South Africans respond meaningfully to change, as we've seen in other areas. And I believe if there was a positive change, people would regain some of the hope and optimism that they've lost.
Yeah. These findings are quite sobering, just given that I think it's fair to say South Africa, in general, is a very optimistic, able to see the sunnier side of life kind of people. So, yeah, it's certainly a sign of the times. Dr. Stephen Gordon, let me thank you for your time this morning. Some incredibly interesting findings with this dissatisfaction survey that was done by the HSRC.